welcome to another episode of Share Your Story with Chet. So we have Willow with us today. Willow and I connected on LinkedIn, and it's funny because we were talking about certain things and then she reached out to me and said, hey, let me give you a couple of tips about your videos and camera setup and everything. And I was like, who is she, right? Like, okay, I said, why not? And then she sort of reached out to me and she gave me a couple of tips, and I actually had no idea about this stuff, right? And the kind of things she was noticing, I actually had no idea with. And that's what she does, is she helps small and medium businesses, build their online presence, elevate their online presence using video. Obviously, she's also into digital marketing, but on a personal front, she's a photographer, she's a surfer, and she very clearly mentions about surfing on her profile, but also she's a podcaster, right? So yeah, it's a lot of quirkiness mixed all together in one that builds Willow up, right? So yeah, welcome, Willow. Why don't you introduce yourself for a minute, and
Thank
then
you.
Go ahead and ask you some stuff.
Can you introduce me every time now? Thank you. I'm honored to be here. And I appreciate you taking what I said when we were just on a call, a couple months ago. You took it really well, as in you were open and really gracious. So I wanted to thank you for that. And thanks for having me on your podcast.
Absolutely. All right.
So would you like me to introduce myself formally?
Well, give us just a little simple thing about Willow a little bit, and then we'll talk more about you as we go down the podcast.
Okay. Go down the line. Well, like you said, I help people with their online presence, primarily through video. And I have a long history of working in the production world. So producing and directing, editing, mainly commercials for a long time in San Francisco. And then I moved abroad to Lisbon, Portugal, the California of Europe, as people say. And I wanted to live here. And at the same time, I didn't know how to work here and get into a completely new culture and language. So then I started doing remote video production. So COVID was a big help because then everything went remote. And
absolutely.
And it almost happened by like a happy accident in a way. And so then I started producing and shooting video over Zoom like this. And the person films themselves, on their camera. And so then I started creating content with people, and it really simplified the process. And for me, production it's a big operation. There's a huge team involved. There's so much planning, big budgets, but it doesn't have to be that way. And so now I love working with small businesses, the CEO and founders and their team, and really helping people show up on camera as themselves, skipping the performance, showing up as authentic as possible, and creating something that really showcases people's personality instead of switching into some person or character that people think they need to be in the professional world.
Yeah, that makes so much sense. Thank you for that. And you're right, you got to, and it's taken me a while to understand that and get to that level as well, trying to be myself. And I think it was one of your posts recently as well, which was about, performing and performance. And, you can't, if you want to be someone else all the time, it's exhausting, it's tiring, because you got to put that persona on all the time. So it's better to be yourself and get your own tribe, right? But yeah, that was a really good post, to be honest. That made so much sense.
Yeah. Thank you. I appreciate it. And it's taken a long time as well to skip that, the idea of who you're supposed to be. And I think, especially in a professional format or platform like LinkedIn, which thank God it's changing, because I'm newish to LinkedIn. I, was on Instagram for a while, and I feel like people are now like embracing the fact that people want to see real people, because if you were going to work with someone, of course you want to know that they're qualified, they can do the job. But ultimately, do you want to work with this person? And how would you know if they're putting on a persona and speaking in a language that doesn't even make sense? It's more like lingo. So I think we see that a lot too. And it's a turnoff.
Yeah, it does make sense. And I remember one of my conversations with somebody saw my LinkedIn profile, and I was very serious about it. When I started out, I was like this and this, and everything was in order. It's like,
Right.
you kind of talk different when I'm speaking to you now. And I was like, okay, that was the one day when I was like, let me do some change about myself, let me be who I am,
Right.
move forward. Awesome.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes. And I do have a podcast, like you mentioned. And speaking of like positioning and being real, so it's called Carve Your Own Fucking Path. Now, when I told my mom that that was the title, she was like, does it have to have that word in it? Because it's can put it puts people, off, but those are the people that A, aren't going to listen to it, and B, they won't be a guest, So I think in real life, occasionally, if appropriate, I'll say, drop the F word, not for impact necessarily, but it's like, if you speak that way, when people meet you, it's like, if you put yourself out there as this one person, let's say, but in real life, they meet you and it's completely different, then there's a disconnect.
Absolutely. That makes so much sense. Yeah. And that was one of the questions about that way down in the questions that I had.
Oh, okay. So I jumped out.
No, that's okay, because I was like, on LinkedIn, we should be careful, but it's okay, But what was that one motivation for starting it? Was it exactly what you just told us, that get people out and be who they are? Or why start Carve Your Own Fucking Path? I just want to understand, what was the real motivation behind that specific name towards the podcast that you created, right?
So years ago, I was in a bar and they had, the coasters that you put drinks on. And there was several on the bar, and I remember grabbing one and it just said, Carve Your Own Fucking Path. Immediately, I was like, this resonates so deeply. So I grabbed it and I took it home and I put it on my fridge. And for a long time, I looked at it every single day. And there was something about it that at that time I had a corporate job. I was living in San Francisco. I didn't always like follow the straight and narrow prescribed path, as I call it, but I still was in that struggle of like, I really want to do my own thing. I don't know what that looks like exactly yet. So now fast forward years later, I've then moved abroad and really broken off and carved my own path, which I had a lot of resistance around because it was so different than what other people were doing, especially in my age and, in every stage of life. And so when I moved, it was probably a year or two after that, I started to think, well, I love interviewing people. That's my dream job, by the way. Like if I could, so interviewing people was always a dream type of thing. And then with podcasting came about, and I listened to a lot of podcasts, and there was something about the medium that I just thought, oh, I could do this. And I resonated with it. So the title just kind of came from that place of like, I want to interview women at the time, specifically women that have started to live their life on their own terms. And I was living in an area that had a lot of women like that. So I started interviewing people around me, friends of mine. And then that's sort of how it started. Now I interview. Now I've transitioned into specifically unconventional entrepreneurs, men and women, because the entrepreneurial path is really interesting to me, and so I've sort of switched into that focus. So that's how it started.
That's interesting, and I guess that's the reason, like, I started this podcast, because for me, it was about interviewing interesting people, so after connecting with them, trying to figure out if they have a story, that's what this is all about, right? And then inspiring people. I didn't want to do a salesy kind of podcast where you're like, okay, let's talk about sales, how to do sales and all, because that's not just me, right? So I wanted to do something to inspire people and find people who are quirky, who are interesting, right? So that's why you're on this one as well.
Thank you. It's nice to be on the other end of things. I appreciate it. And this, people's stories, it's fascinating. How did people, a lot of time we see the success. I recently interviewed a guy that is 40 years he's been in business, very successful on the outside, has all the accolades, built three multi-million-dollar businesses before 40, worked with Tony Robbins as a coach, all of these things. But I wanted to know, how did this all start? What were the choices that you were faced with? And what was the mindset? And also, being able to glean information and learn from these people and pass that on. And so I'm always so grateful, just by the the humbleness of people and being open and sharing. And people have been quite vulnerable. And I think at the end of the day, we all want to share our story. We all want to be seen and heard. And so I love, being able to have a platform that offers that place, and just exactly what you're doing as well.
And yeah, I mean, you're right. And exactly to a point, like, you want to be real and you want to be authentic, and gone are the days when you want to be the perfectionist, with a tie up and being everything good, versus just being who you are, right? And I think I see that on LinkedIn so much. Like, people are just natural and just talking. But they've learned over time. They've become confident, and that's how they've progressed. And that actually comes up to one of my questions. I was like, how do you get confident on camera? And it took me a long time, to be honest. Like, I used to be hiding behind, and I used to be the guy who was like, okay, here's the creators, but not a video, right?
Right. Yep.
So and I've tried your EFT technique as well, but I'm sure there's,
cool.
There maybe, is there something simpler, or is there something that can help people just to become confident on camera? Because that is so important in today's world, especially after the pandemic, or with the pandemic going on.
Right. Okay. Great question. I just did a whole presentation about this, so I'll try to simplify it. First of all, when you're creating a video, it's not about you. It's about your audience. Who are you speaking to? This podcast, who is going to listen to this? You're involved. There's a part of, you're sharing your message. It's your perspective. And I always, think about what is your intention, and think about who you're speaking to. Now, maybe that's a little bit blurry. You don't know exactly who you're talking to, but you know that you're pressing record and putting this video somewhere for a reason.
Right.
And so when you think about the other person, it takes yourself out of the equation. And we're so self-critical. I sound stupid. I look dumb. This, all of that stuff. First of all, we're all so obsessed with ourselves that we're not thinking about the other person so much. The other thing is, a camera is it's just the meat, is like, that's the in-between, so when you look into a camera lens, it is quite awkward because it's a piece of technology, it's a piece of equipment. But on the other side, someone will be receiving that message. So think about who you're speaking to. And sorry, there's honking. It's about practicing. Like, nothing, I don't think we just all come out of the gate, and just can deliver a message, especially to a piece of technology. But it's also watching yourself back and picking out things that you like, and maybe one that you want to change. So 3 that you don't, and then 1 you'd like to change, because everything gets better with practice. And the more, it's like practicing how to be yourself ultimately. And that perfectionism is, like, to me, it's a creativity killer. And I've been caught in it many, many times, and I think especially with video, because you're like, I can do it one more time. Let me just do it. Next thing you know, you've done 100 takes.
And it's exhausting. It is so tiring after that. And then you lose motivation because you're like, you know what? Screw it.
Yeah.
Maybe tomorrow. Yeah.
It gets worse.
You're right.
I feel like, so I like, for me, the bloopers are the best. And sometimes I weave them into videos if I'm working with someone else, and I show them, like, this is the fun part. You making a mistake or stumbling on your words a little bit. It's like, that's what makes you human. So I love live video, actually, for that reason. You cannot go back. There's no re-record. You just hit. It depends on what you're trying to do. But I think live video is a great way to get you out of your head and into the moment. You're actually speaking to other people. That's, I think, the beauty of live video as well. You have an audience that you can react to, because sometimes if it's just you, it's a one-sided conversation. So there's always editing as well. Hit record and go, and then chop out the bits that are not necessary. Cause that's like another thing, is really becoming concise with what you want to say. But so I always say, like, take 5 minutes before you record, close your eyes, visualize the other person on the other end. And they are so eager to hear what you have to say. And that what you have to say is going to be valuable to them. it's going to resonate and impact them in the way that you're looking to impact them. And even if it's just, I want to share my story and someone's going to be there listening, there's nothing better than, I'm not a great public speaker, but let's say, you're in a room and people, everyone there, it's really comfortable, your friends, and they've been waiting to hear from you. And so when you're speaking, that everyone's listening and interested, rather than thinking about all of the negative things. So I think really it's like, humanize it. It's just you talking to another person, and you're really creating that intimacy with someone. That's the beauty of video.
Yeah, sorry. I think there's so much pressure for a lot of people who think that because this is going to get them business, especially in today's world, this is how it's going to be. And I'm guilty for that because that's how I started, right? Versus, and that's when you lose it, versus now I'm just like, I just want to create content, what I resonate with, the way I do. And I've sort of found my ground into what I want to speak, right? And I've got a lot more comfortable from 20 takes a day to 5 to maybe 2 or 3 at least at a time.
Nice.
But that's
great.
Quite an improvement, right? And that took me almost 6 to 8 months to get into. And
yep,
I remember sitting and hopefully, people listening to Willow and myself, when you start, that's the hardest part, right? Like my first video was crap, and I know that, but if I wouldn't have done that, I wouldn't be able to sort of move forward, and
right.
And I guess you meet a lot of people who don't want to be on video, but you have to convince them and you have to sort of get them out there. So that's something that you specialize in as well, but yeah.
Yes, it's a huge one. And the other thing is, what it allows is for people to connect with you. So if you think about it, this is, I think, a good analogy. Now, I know a lot of people don't like doing this. So text messaging, we just text everything, but a lot of people, including myself, especially in Europe, use voice message recordings. And so it's just like hitting the button and you're just speaking instead of having to sit there and craft a message. It's the same thing with content. If you have a post that you could do a video, you're able to then free flow. People get to see your energy, your mannerisms. You're like, oh, okay. You immediately know whether you're going to resonate with this person. So I feel like it's that no like trust factor. You're going to propel it, or, create that so much faster rather than writing content, which you could have a copywriter writing your content, who knows who it is. So really it's like you're telling so much of your story without even speaking with, again, your energy, with body language, with the whole thing. Like people can really just know right away, oh yeah, this person, I really understand.
So funny you say that. I have to say, because I just did a video a couple of days ago, which is going to come out later, which was basically the value of video, how you can just put your points across, how as much as people talk about articles and everything, we all consume videos because it's easy. It's a minute or two. You watch it, you like it, you watch it more. If you don't, you swipe up, and that's just how the world is. But yeah, that's a great point, to be honest, just the value of video coming out in today's world, It's awesome.
Yeah. Practice.
So so I want to know then, based on video, like you work with a lot of small to medium businesses. So how can a great video make a difference to an upcoming small to medium business or even an entrepreneur in today's world? Because, I've always said after the pandemic started, things have changed. Whether you like it or not, within a year, everything's gone, 5 levels ahead already. But how can a great video make a difference to an entrepreneur? And you work with so many, right, in small businesses. How can it help them with their business and other areas in today's world?
Well, the thing is, people spend a lot of money on marketing or a website, for example. I had a client, so much branding was beautiful, website, really nice. And then she created a video just herself. She was recording, and then she's the CEO of a company that has big clients. Like when she signs a contract, it's $250,000 as an example. So she has a team of consultants. So she sends me this video and it's her on the beach. She's in a wetsuit, surfboard, and she's talking. Her voice, the whole thing was really not a good representation of her brand.
Mm-hmm.
Now, in real life, she's very confident. She does stand-up comedy. She's not shy,
Right.
but the camera was a completely new thing for her. And so when she sent me that, I had to be, first off, a friend and say, this is going to hurt your brand if you put this out there. And then she took it well, because again, she didn't know what she was doing. I think in her mind, she's like, well, I'm in a wetsuit. It's showing I'm active, and, my company has to do with wellness. But so then we started working together, and then that's been now almost a year relationship. So I work with her whole team, because she realized my team really needs this too. None of us are great on camera. And so in that case, it was, if you're going to put something out, it does not need to be this incredibly polished, perfect commercial. We see that enough, and it doesn't make a big difference. YouTube videos, these days, people are filming them themselves. It's very obvious. We don't need to see perfection, but what you want to do to position your brand is put the energy into making sure you show up as a powerful presence. It doesn't matter if you have to be, people have to see you. So good lighting and good audio,
right?
Good framing. So those things I think are more important than this perfectly polished thing. So putting that energy into getting training, for example, to help with your on-camera presence, and then also really being able to streamline your messaging. There's so many things that you can cut out to make it so much more effective, like skipping the intro. You don't need to go on and on about who you are, what you do, what you're going to talk about. Dive right in, put a title in there. So I think in that way, you can immediately position yourself with a nice video. It just it's just that elevation of your brand, for example. And so it's all subconscious as well. There's expectations. I think as a business to have something a bit more polished. Now, I'm shooting videos with people on an iPhone and then editing it to make it and adding more footage in, but it's still a video shot on a phone.
Right. You don't need $100,000 camera anymore, right? But
no.
It's, to your point, it's always getting the basics right. And that's our conversation as well. You told me everything's fine, but do a few tweaks, it'll get better. And those are basics, right? Lighting, having a microphone, lifting my laptop up a bit and everything. So yeah.
Cool. Right. It looks a lot better.
There's a few things which I can't fix, which you told me, but that's why I covered it up with something else. But it's
right.
But
it makes a difference. And ultimately people want to see you. So if your camera is a bit off, the positioning, or the lighting isn't great, all those things, people they won't watch it.
Right.
Simple as that. So I think again, and we pick up on energy. So even if you are, and that's why I don't script either with people, because when someone's reading a script, you can tell ultimately, so all those little things, and just having a live person, because imagine you're shooting your video, you're like on the 20th time. If you have someone there, the feedback is immediate. The tweaks are immediate. It's like, so that's the transformation that I've seen, is being live with people. There's, creating a space that people are comfortable, instead of just sitting there going, is this good? I don't know. Yeah. Having someone provide that feedback has been really helpful.
And I was just doing that with a client recently as well. And once we started Zooming and then we were having conversations, it took us a while to get the videos out, but figuring it out and making that comfort level and asking questions and being the other person across the screen made it a lot easier for him to actually create that content, because it's just like me, right? Like sometimes I'm talking to the camera, but then sometimes if I'm talking to somebody, it's smoother, like the way I'm talking to you. If I'm on camera myself, it never comes out the way it's supposed to come out, right? It takes a bit of time to practice. So yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah. Awesome.
Definitely.
Cool. So now I want to ask you this question, right? Now we're going to move off the business and everything and go more.
Sounds good.
Right. So a couple of questions about you. So, and I really want to know, and I've read your profile. I've seen and I believe Francisco, he helped you craft your story, obviously for LinkedIn. Yeah, this guy is the most funniest dude on
I
LinkedIn.
know.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a storytelling coach. I mean, how cliche does that sound?
But what was
But
actually
yeah.
really going in your mind? Because you said literally, you said screw it, kind of got sick and tired of the corporate world. You moved to Lisbon. But what was that one reason? And I know you wanted that lifestyle, I guess, where you can surf when you want. But was it the freedom lifestyle, or was it the thing of getting out of this corporate zone and just being on yourself, away from all these people and doing what you do best? What was that one thing that actually got you to? Because it's a big thing, to get up and move. Like, I'm living in my fifth country now, right? And for me, it's
Wow.
always about I want change, I want to travel, I want to see different places, but I'm just okay with whatever happens. Australia's probably base now, right? But I haven't. I guess moving to Lisbon is quite a big thing.
It was a big one. It's far away from home.
It is, and it's not
Yeah.
where you look at going. So what was it? Sorry, well, what was that one thing that actually hit your mind and you're like, you know what? That's it, man. I need to get the hell out of here and do what I want to do next.
Well, there is a specific moment, and it was so a little backstory. Europe was always my dream to live here. So that it would, but in my mind, it was 10 years out, 15 years. That it never was a solid plan, but I just knew that Europe was a destination I would love to live in. And then a series of events. It was working in a corporate job, which I did enjoy and loved the people. And then I was laid off and then it changed quickly. And I started traveling and seeing a different way of life. And I just thought, why am I so, why it was like that inner voice that just kept kind of popping up, but I would stop listening to it because I'm like, no, I should be doing this. I should all the shoulds. And living in San Francisco, a city that's very ambitious, big companies, big dreams. And I was moving along, but I just didn't feel like I didn't want that. And I started to feel very good where the conversations were not interesting to me. I saw myself, packing up my stuff and just being more free. I think that's the feeling that I would have. And so when I came to Portugal specifically, which was very last minute, I was on this, and I started to, it's like, it was based on a feeling, I felt really good here. And there was a familiarity because again, it's very much like California, the vibe. And then I had an opportunity. I met someone in a cafe and I was doing some editing. I was shooting a video here just for the tourism board, actually. So I came here with like a reason, and he saw that I was, working on this video. We started talking, and then he showed me some properties that he had, and he was a local, owned a bunch of things. Within 2 hours, he was showing me one, and he said, well, my wife, Airbnb's this property. And then I said, well, how much would you like rent this to someone if they wanted to rent it? And he said, the amount was way less than my really small, crappy apartment in San Francisco. And in that moment, I said, I'll rent it from you. And it was like this, it was this crazy intuition, of like, this is the right thing to do. And we shook hands and I was like, what did I just do? I just said I was going to rent this guy's apartment.
Did I just leave my life and just decide to move forward and move to another
crazy.
country?
So it was in that moment that I was like, because there was, it was just a feeling of being empowered, of like, what, I don't need to, to like get permission to do this. I didn't even know logistics, how I could live here as an American, visa. I didn't know any of that stuff. And I just figured it will fall into place. And I think that's the thing when you make decisions like that, again, intuition is huge and really listening to it. And usually the how does fall into place because people get tripped up on all that. Well, how do I this now? I don't have children. So that's another thing, is like, moving with a family. I didn't own a home. So there was these elements that I already had more flexibility.
Right.
In a way. And so I think I hear this all the time. I've lived here for several years now, and people say, I want to do that. I want to do something like that. And I'm like, well, then do it. Yeah. No one is going to do it for you. You need to make that decision. Once you do, everything, things will fall into place.
I love that.
Yeah.
And like when I left I was made redundant from hospitality as well, from a full-time corporate job. But I was actually like, before I knew it was going to come because of COVID, and I could see the situation for about 3 months, but I never made the effort of setting myself up for something else in that same world in terms of corporate and a full-time job as a manager. Because I was like, you know what, this is probably a great blessing coming in, because I want to focus on something else. I want to be free. And I'm in a country where you do any job to survive. It doesn't really matter. You can be a wait staff. You can be the guy standing at the petrol station. You could drive an Uber. You could be a manager. You could be a CEO. Nobody cares, And
yeah, that's nice.
And that's something when I said, I want to leave organizations. I want to work for smaller places, and I want to build my marketing career. I want to do something because I want the freedom. And it took me a while to even understand what freedom is, because I was such a corporate junkie and a slave, right? Where I was just, this is how things go. You got to work for the best of the best. You got to work in these places and all that jazz and great hotels.
Right.
But I love it. Like the freedom, I just feel different because, I'm like, I can do what I want. If I don't like a job, I can just move tomorrow. Right. It's all good, but I can get up when I want to.
Exactly.
I'm running marketing. I'm doing a podcast, and nothing would be possible if I was stuck in a corporate job. And I know that. Like we wouldn't be here talking, because all I'd be doing is working from morning to night. So, it's empowering. Exactly. That's a great word to use for this. That's so cool to know. Yeah.
One thing people would say, which caught me off guard, was they said that I had a lot of courage, and I never thought I had courage. I didn't think of it like that, because to me, it was almost like a, not life and death, but almost to that level. Like this, I was in such a feeling of disconnect that it was unbearable at times. And so that decision, it was like, it had to happen, something had to shift. And so that's what it surprised me about the courage thing, because, going to a new country, yes, new language, new everything. I moved by myself. So didn't have a job. It was just completely taking that leap. But I knew on the other side, it was going to be this completely, hopefully good experience. Now it's not easy moving to another country. There's so many challenges that come with it, being away from family, all of that. And so every year now I kind of check in again. I'm like, is this what I want? Do I want to be here? And again, I feel so much more empowered to just make these choices rather than, no, I should be doing this. I should stay in this job for another year because, well, I'm going to get more stocks, or whatever, because I've stayed in jobs for those reasons, but the other side of what you said is like, you have a podcast now, you're helping people with marketing, all of these things. No one is telling you when to get up in the morning. No one's saying, edit your podcast, get that, reach out to that guest. Right. So it takes a certain personality, and I feel like as humans though, in general, we want to be able to make our own decisions and create our lives. At the same time, it's really nice to have that security of a job. Now, anything can happen. I was blindsided a bit too. I've been caught off guard. Like, wait a minute, I thought I was going to make that decision and leave when I wanted to. But, ultimately when you take that power back in a way, it builds on itself. I think then you keep going and you realize, wait, I can do this. Okay. I can take this on as well. So that's why I think I love interviewing entrepreneurs, because it is a certain mentality and it does take courage.
Absolutely.
To do it.
It takes courage, and I guess it's, understanding that when you're falling down, are you able to get back up? Because a lot of these entrepreneurs that you speak to and all, it's never been an easy path, right? Like they're carving their own fucking path, as you said. It's a lot of ups and downs, and it's also motivating to see what people are doing. And then you're like, you know what? I'm actually going through it. Maybe I'm going through it in a different phase or a different level, but in my own small terms, I'm doing this, because everyone's different in their own ways. But, it's so cool. And I love how you said that, because I felt so free after I decided as well. And I said, we'll see what happens. I moved to Australia. I didn't have a job. I came here, I looked for a job. I started from the bottom, got a full-time job, went back down again, looking for random jobs to pay bills certain times. That's happened with COVID. Like, it was so different. I was like, is this happening to me? Because I was so used to that structure of security and everything, right? So, but I feel good because I'm like, it's all good. We'll figure it out what happens tomorrow, but we won't be doing anything we're doing today. And that's the best part, right? We're evolving, we're growing, we're moving forward.
Exactly. And it is taking that leap, the unknown, which people are so afraid of. Personally, I thrive in that space, and I don't know why, but I like things where it's a bit unknown, because I feel like that's more like where you can create stuff, and it's not all mapped out. And so that's been another thing, is learning. It's just, you learn about yourself, and having a business is the biggest personal growth experience I ever have had. I had no idea. I'm like, I've read all the books. I've, had the coaches, I've done the things, but then nothing forces you to really look at yourself, look at your stuff. And a huge thing, which I never thought that I would experience.
We're
if people want to grow, start a business, put yourself out there.
You manage everything. You're the sales guy, profits, losses, you're everything, right? And again,
exactly.
Like from a job to doing it yourself, I've learned so much as well. Like the last 1.5 years has been amazing. I wouldn't have thought I'd make it till here. That's so cool, man. All right. Now I actually want to know, tell me about Nairobi, because you went to Nairobi to do some volunteer work, right? And it's pretty awesome. I try to find stuff which I find interesting right now, and I love volunteer work, charity, or anything that can help other people, right? So tell me a little bit about that, because I've heard stories of people talking on TV and all, and seeing pictures, but I've never actually met someone who's been to different countries to do charity work, right? So what was it like, and why did you go there? What was it?
Well, it was again a lifelong dream of going, and I didn't know what country. I just knew somewhere in Africa I wanted to go, and maybe that cliche thing, but there was a huge pull to go there. Years ago, I had a life coach, and this is like way before people had life coaches, and it's like 15 years ago, and we did a visualization together, about future and all that. And then I in the visualization, I dropped down and I was there, and I had a camera with me, and I was working with in like a small village. So I had this whole vision. It was like I was watching a movie of my life. Within a year, I booked a ticket to Nairobi. I did research, and I found this program where I could go and work in a school, type of thing. So I ended up going to Nairobi for a month, life-changing experience. And so I came back within about a year later, because at the time I was teaching kids how to make films. So I was teaching the whole filmmaking process, from script writing, storytelling, camera, acting, editing. And I had so my partner and I, we were doing this for years in the summer with very privileged children in the States, and then I thought, well, why don't we take this and go to Nairobi? I have connections. So I went back a year later, and that whole year leading up to it, I was working with a local film teacher in Nairobi. She selected these children that were interested. They were interested in acting or, just the process. And they all were from this slum just outside of Nairobi in Kibera. It's one of the largest slums. Like, it's 1 million people living in there. And so we went and we did a 10-day workshop with them. We lived with them. We rented a big house. And these kids some of them had never seen a house like this, running water. And we had a chef that was cooking meals. I mean, it was to them completely a new experience. And we filmed a story that they wrote together, and they acted in it, and they helped film and edit. So we, by the end of this process, we had this 10 or 15-minute film, and we showed it to their parents. We gathered everyone together. We showed the parents, and it was the most surreal experience I think I've ever had, because just seeing their reactions and having this experience. I mean, the first night at dinner, I remember we're sitting there and all the kids are there. It's completely silent. And I'm just thinking, what have we done? This is a crazy, you know, what are they thinking? And do they think we're crazy? And yeah, the whole thing, but we ended up having a great time, but it was, it still is one of the best experiences of my life, actually. And this was 10 years ago that I was there and did that. And then recently, just within 2 weeks or so, one of the guys that was a contact for me there, that kind of helped, you know, with the whole thing. He said, I want to now do what you guys did, you know, that film workshop with a local women's center, a girls' center. And so now I'm starting to work with them again to help them share their stories. So these girls are in there and they're living there. So they're, you know, leaving their homes because they've not been living in good conditions. They're victims, you know, of certain, you know, abuse. And so now I'm going to start working with them on, you know, crafting stories and then helping them film the stories. And maybe I'll go back next year and film in person.
That's so cool, huh? Like,
yeah, it just resurfaced again.
Yeah. You did something 10 years ago and it's like a domino effect, right? It's coming back and this is more, I guess, this is more of that satisfaction of helping communities, because this is not really about, and I'm sure this is not a money project for you, but that internal satisfaction of saying, man, you know, I saw that kid smile the other day. I saw that woman smile because of what we did. Like opportunities and that's something. Yeah.
That's the thing. And I think it's so easy. I mean, there's so many charities, there's so many things out there, and you can throw money at things for sure. But being able to help them learn something, teach something, and create something together, that is the experience that I like to have. And that was the pull before. I thought, yeah, you can give money, but where's it going? Who is, like, you know, and so being able, you know, to go there also is a privilege, of course. And so now with this, you know, being able to share a skill set and
empower
ultimately
them
having
to do
them share their
something
story
else with that skill set, right?
Right. And just them going back to wanting to be, you know, seen and heard and everything, having them being able to share their story in whatever capacity they want to. And I mean, I think that's the biggest thing too, is knowing, okay, your story matters. Here's a platform. Here's a way that you can share it with other people.
Wow. So good. I love that. You know, and when I read about Nairobi and you being there, because I couldn't find too much information about it. All I knew is that you volunteered there, right? And, and I was so curious. I was like, what actually drove her to go there? And that was my curiosity, right? Because going to Nairobi to volunteer is not, or any other country to go and volunteer, you have to have some motivation, because like you said, you know, it's easy to give charity money versus actually making the effort of giving some empowerment, making that effort of going and helping people grow. So that's a pretty cool story, Willow. Thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you. I'll keep you posted how it goes with this new project.
Absolutely. I'm very curious. So I'm going to ask you this now. If you know or not, but I want to know, what is the best piece of advice you got and the worst piece of advice you were given? Like, is there one of each you can say? You don't have to tell who gave you, but I'm just curious. Like,
okay, so I know the best piece of advice for sure. And this was in that time that I was telling you, this, like, feeling disconnected. I was living, you know, San Francisco, and I came to Lisbon on a week trip, a surf trip. Did not plan on moving here, but it was just a trip. And I met this a producer that from LA, and I was here, and then a friend of a friend said, "Oh, my husband is actually in Lisbon, and filmmaker." So I was thinking, great, this could be a new connection. And he lived in New York at the time, and I was going to New York for a couple of months. And so this was a time I was just sort of kind of floating around, you know, and got stuck in the shoulds. I thought I should move to New York, which in my heart of hearts is so not what I wanted to do. But so I meet this guy in New York, and we meet up, we're having coffee, and I was prepared to say, you know, like, if there's anyone, you know, any jobs, any some, you know, connections you have. And I said, so yeah, you know, living in New York, I think it's better. It's good for my career and all that. And then I said, but I ultimately want to live in Europe though.
Mm.
And he was just like, okay, can I just tell you something? Can I give you some advice? I don't know, however he prefaced it. He said, go now. Don't waste time. Don't be here because you think it's good. You know, if your career, you should be doing something. If that's what you ultimately want, do it now. And that was not what I expected to hear from him, I guess. And so it was like that permission slip that I subconsciously, I think, needed.
Mm.
So that conversation, yeah, it clicked. I was like, okay, I got to do it now, because you never know what's going to happen. You could get locked into something and then you don't have that freedom anymore. And that was sort of his experience. He said, I wanted to move to LA, and then I waited, and then I got married, and then I had a kid. He's like, and I can't move anymore. I've got other people involved. And so, yeah, do it now was the best advice.
Well, that was one
The
of the
worst advice. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that was actually just one of the questions I was going to ask you next. Was there something that changed the direction of your life? But I guess that all combines together and say, yes, that's what changed the direction of your life, you know? Yeah. Awesome.
It was a big one. Yeah, definitely. The worst advice, that's a tough one. I mean, I would say it's probably just parents. You should, get I didn't have a lot of pressure to, follow this path, but I think both my parents are quite traditional and have very hard workers. And I think I always felt different because I didn't want that 9 to 5 and just like that grind. It never was something I resonated with. And so I think that it's always like this hard work thing. Hard work is like a badge that you wear. That's what I've seen modeled for me. Now, I've never worked harder than when I've had my own business because I care so much more. And so and a lot of the time it doesn't feel like work. It's an extension of who I am. And that's good to have boundaries though. I've gotten better. But so I think in that way, if I did follow the traditional path or, thinking, yes, work hard, work for someone else and just, and then you can retire, go live your life and travel and do all these things. If I had followed that path or followed their path, then no, I think I wouldn't have been being true to myself. Right. So I'm definitely the black sheep for sure.
I think that's becoming, that was common back in the day, but now it's getting more and more common where people, because there was something on television I was watching where the Great Resign or something they're calling it, where
Great Resignation.
Yeah, right. More and more people are just like myself, and I guess like you a while ago, we're just like, screw this, man. I want to resign. I want to start something on my own. I want to try something else, and it takes a while to do that, but yeah. Oh, exactly. Great point. I guess, being traditional, well, following a path which was probably set out.
But it's not for everyone.
Yeah, absolutely. All right. So now tell me this, and I came up with this today, right? One piece of Willow's wisdom for someone who may follow your path.
That's a big one. Great questions, by the way. Wisdom. I think this is something that is a continual process. And it is when you hear that voice. Now, I think we have many voices. We've got the should, we've got the parents, we've got all that culture, society, all of that stuff happening. It's really tuning into where do you feel the most alive? Maybe not where, but what are you doing? Who are you around? And that could be a place as well, that kind of lights you up. So really being mindful of that, because it doesn't have to look the way that you think it's going to look or what other people think it's going to look. So that would be the biggest thing is if you, and going back to the permission, because I think a lot of us, we want that permission. We want to be accepted and validated, and external validation is very important. Anyone that says like, don't pay attention, don't listen to, external validation or pay attention. I mean, it's important. We're tribal human beings. We want to be accepted and part of a group, but at the same time, really, really tapping into you as an individual and what really feels good to you. I think that's something that we've disconnected from a bit, because we're so much in our minds and what makes sense, what makes logical sense, logistical sense, and will prepare you for this future. You know, we're always kind of like looking so far ahead rather than like, well, what about right now?
Live in the moment, right? And I love
that was a lot I just said.
Yeah. But I really hope people listen to this. And, you know, coming from Asian countries where that's pretty much the norm, right? Like, what's the society going to say? And I've been very lucky that I've never been pressurized and nobody told me to be a doctor or a lawyer and all that jazz, because
that's good.
Then I was hopeless in that stuff anyway, right? I was always a hospitality guy and my parents supported it. So I was pretty lucky about that. But to a lot of people, you know, it's like, you got to be something big. You got to follow that path. And a lot of them are not happy. And I can tell you that I know for a fact a lot of people who've done the MBAs and all the stuff that they bought and they've gone through, they don't have a job anymore because they're stuck. And that's exactly something that you're doing in Nairobi, right? You're giving that opportunity. You're empowering them to do something with a skill set rather than trying to hold a degree. And I think it's changing now, which is great. It's evolving, because for many years it was all about, are you a graduate? Are you this? Are you that? Are you going for that PhD and all that? Versus now, people are like, how do we survive? The young guys are making millions of dollars sitting on the laptop, you know,
Bitcoin,
right? A lot of things. And people are like, okay, there are different things out there. So that's awesome. Yeah. I can really resonate with that. Yeah. And I've been, sorry, after you.
No, I think these days, like, it's hard to even wrap my head. There's a big tech conference just in town, and I was meeting people that early adopters on things, you know, okay, Bitcoin, I'm talking specifically now, but it's just like all these norms are not the norms anymore, because there's so much innovation, so many things happening very quickly. So I think this like old outdated idea of, go to school, get the degree, get the job. I mean, if anything, it's really about creating something, learning that way, teaming up with someone else. I mean, I'm definitely on the creator side. I think if that is something you want to do, because it's never a guarantee and it's going to be much harder, but the rewards and the satisfaction and fulfillment that come from that, I think are definitely worth it.
Yeah, that's cool. And, you know, to people saying being an entrepreneur is hard, but also it's not bad to be doing a job, right? Like, it's nothing bad, but it's just, you got to find your space and when the time when you think is right. For me, it was last year. For you was probably a few years ago. For somebody, maybe 5 years later. For somebody, maybe the now, right? So yeah, it's awesome. Right. Hopefully, you inspired somebody to make the change, you know, and then wait for the results.
I hope so. I think it's it's always sometimes I think about, it's people say think about your mortality. That's something that will motivate you in a way, and it's you know, waiting for this perfect time, perfect situation. I mean, it doesn't really exist. Now, making a rash decision, leaving a job when you don't have anything, you know, there are smart decisions for sure. But ultimately, when you do step out of this, because it's that comfort zone, and ultimately it's operated by fear. We all have fear, but it's like really facing it and going, well, what is the worst possible scenario? If I take this step, what's the worst that can happen? If I create this video, put it online, what's the worst thing that's going to happen? It's not that bad if you really think about it.
Right.
But we get so hung up on, you know, not wanting to feel any pain or discomfort that it just keeps us, even though the discomfort that we're feeling is almost worse.
Because I guess when you're doing a lot of things, you're always looking at someone else's perspective, right? What are they thinking, or what are they doing, or how that might affect, versus this is something that you got to do for yourself, right?
Right.
And you gotta, I keep coming back, you gotta carve your own fucking path.
Gotta do it.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's I think it's like that, living on your own terms. And there's something about being able to, make decisions again, because I think we naturally want that. We want to, you know, and the other side too, is when we're given that freedom that I just wake up at noon and go, things. Okay, maybe in the beginning, because I remember I created a lifestyle that was very free. I surfed every single day. I didn't have a lot of structure because I wanted to experience that. But then this, it kicked in of like, I want to contribute. I want to help others. I want to be of value and of service. And so I think that ultimately as a human have that in us, that drive, if we are given the freedom. And I think you have to give that to yourself sometimes, but we're so programmed to have people tell us what to do and which direction to go, because it's easier in a way. We don't have to think about it, but it ultimately can feel really inauthentic, to throw that word in there, that buzzword. Yeah.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, that just makes sense. I can really resonate with that. All right. So I'm going to close this podcast with one last question. I just want you to summarize your life till today and what's next in Willow's life. How would you summarize yourself in a story, and how Francisco would probably create a story? How would you put yourself in that story and say what's actually next for Willow?
Oh, that's interesting. Well, what is next is jumping more into the unknown and trusting that it's just going to be bigger. And I don't mean bigger as in, I feel like, okay, so letting go is also something that would be another piece of advice too. Because this is what I'm working on, is the letting go and the trusting of the energy and the effort has been there, and it's just now, after quite a while, I think things are unfolding better than I could have imagined, but I had the vision to begin with. And so with that, it's that, because again, this personal growth experience that I've been on has been like very, very uncomfortable, and it's a roller coaster ride. And so I feel like now it's just picking up momentum. Now, it didn't happen in the time frame that I wanted it to, and I had it all planned and the goals written out on the paper. It didn't happen that way, and it's not happening in that way. So if anything, the story is things happen in their own time, and they're better than you could have imagined. So that would be, and ultimately, it's all going to be okay.
Great way to put it. Thank you so much for that. And thank you so much for coming on to share your story. It's always cool to meet awesome people. And look, the whole point of this podcast is, I know a few things about you guys, but I want to discover more with certain things that sort of intrigue me, right? And I really want to thank you again for coming and taking the time out. And
thank you.
And look, I'm sure we're going to reconnect again sometime on this podcast. That's what I tell some of my guests, that 2-3 years later, I want to see where I am, where you are, and then have the same conversation and say, how have we moved forward from where we were, right? And who did we make a difference to? So thank you so much again for coming on.
Chet. Awesome.